We all have little dreams in this life, and as I flip through the chapters of my own life, there's one dream in particular that has stayed with me since childhood. Having a garden pond of my very own, a peaceful little corner of nature to enjoy. But to bring this dream to life, we were going to need a pretty important element: the pond itself. Before that though, it's time for a quiet goodbye. I would like to introduce you to my grandpa's pond, which has been fixed in this exact spot for as long as I can remember, and likely long before that. As a child, some of my most fondest memories were sat right here, watching as my grandpa pointed out all of the little tadpoles that eventually grew up into adorable little frogs. This part of my grandparents' garden felt like a magical forest, 10 times larger than it looks today, and spending time around the pond was one of my favourite things to do. However, since he passed away a few years ago, the pond has become neglected, almost as though he took its life away with him. Well, today I want to change that and give this pond a new lease of life back home with me. I've said it before, but my grandpa was truly my best friend, and much more than a child losing a grandparent, although I wasn't really a child, I simply miss his company. Hanging out with him was a huge part of my life, and it's never quite felt the same since. All I can do now is keep his memory and that of my nan's fervently alive in all that I do. And part of that starts today. I used to pretend that these were dinosaur eggs. Do you remember that? I used to pretend that it was going to hatch if I gave it enough love. Ah, childhood, how I miss thee. I started by carefully removing all of the rocks, pebbles and stones which would all be joining the pond in its new home, and then the main event, the pond basin itself. It's so light. I didn't expect it to be light. Well, that'll be easy then. Shaped like a half barrel. I already had an idea for how this new feature was going to look in my garden. I wanted it to blend seamlessly into the natural foliage, like it's been there for years. A sort of fabled wishing well kind of feel. A place where, if you were ever going to meet a fairy or a gnome, it would be here. And part of the foliage that I want to salvage is this lovely fern bush, which I didn't anticipate would be quite so difficult to extract. Thankfully, my auntie was there to help me, and shout out to my adorable Moomin little mysocks, which were there for moral support. After much tugging and digging, it was finally done. Wow, we did it! And with the basics of this project now in hand, we could continue to plan the rest. So the first task was to work out what I needed to buy, because I want to do this thing properly, and so we're going to need some aquatic compost, some pond gravel, pond plants of course, and potentially a little water feature. Not half as fancy as this one though. Now, for the pond plants, I've done my research in the school of YouTube and had learned that I need a mixture of vegetation, floating leaf plants, oxygenators, which sound like something out of Transformers.
Oxygenators unite.
And marginal plants. And then I would add the stones, house bricks, but we didn't end up needing those in the end, and my grandpa's original log. So, what did I need to actually do? Well, the pond needs to be in an area of the garden that gets shade partway through the day, be surrounded by natural habitat, and then I could add all of the things I'd sourced and some accessories, i.e. the water feature. And just like that, this weekend project will provide me with a calming space in my garden that, hopefully over time, will also provide a home for all of my local critters. And so the next thing was to head to my local garden centre, and always wanting to be on theme, I dressed in a very whimsical vision of blue, complete with a toadstool tote bag. I know, extra as they come. The garden centre provided much inspiration, some a little ambitious, as well as big fish, little fish, cardboard box. Anyone else remember that? But it also left me feeling slightly overwhelmed and thinking to myself, I don't know where to begin. And so I decided to ask someone for help, but not before befriending the cutest little customer I'd ever met. Oh, are you having a wee? Are you having a wee? You're so sweet. Who I clearly wasn't leaving alone until we were chums. Checkout time. Oh, perfect.
This will be nice. You get these little sort of dainty blue flowers
Oh,
on these
they're
ones.
lovely, yeah.
These are like little water forget-me-nots. So,
Well, this pond was my grandpa's once upon a time, so that's kind of
yeah, that'll be nice.
yeah, so thank you, that's perfect. So I was going to treat myself to a nice hard-earned coffee, even though the hard work very much wasn't done by me. It was done by Dave and the other lovely lady whose name I didn't get, unfortunately, because their guidance was so paramount in being able to kind of bring my vision together. And it's just so nice to be able to just speak to a human face to face, explain the concept, explain what I'm trying to achieve with my little natural wildlife pond, and for them just to recommend right there on the spot what it is that I need. And not in like a sales pitch kind of way, trying to get me to spend all my money, but in like a really honest, let me just help you kind of way. It's so much better than the online experience, which is, well, you don't get any of that, do you? So yes, I was going to treat myself to a coffee, but the price came to £141, which wasn't the plants or the compost or the baskets. They only came to £42. It was the fountain that I, in my infinite wisdom, decided to buy at the end, which was £99, a solar panelled fountain, which I think why it was a bit pricier, because of the solar panel. I can't have cables running up my garden. It just wouldn't work. I definitely needed something solar panel. I could have bought it online, but I was here. I've saved up a bit of money to do this project, so I thought, why not? So I'm not going to now spend more on a coffee. Plus, I've got all my lovely little planties here waiting to go and, you know, be introduced to their new home. So we're going to go home. Well, we're going to make one detour first for a very important reason, and then we're going to go home and we're going to, welcome them to their new home. The pit stop I'm referring to is back at my grandparents' house, and it's my nan's rocking chair. I want this to be a space that I can sit in and relax, and as we have no room for this chair in our house, it was destined for a charity shop, but instead it's coming home with me to live in my garden, even if I have to tarp it up when it rains. Plus, I still hadn't transported all of the rocks, and so I made about 1,000 trips to and from my car before realising that the chair wouldn't fit. Unless... Honestly, who needs a pickup truck when you've got a 2007 Volkswagen Beetle convertible, eh? Feeling rather proud of my own initiative, I then headed home and again made about 1,000 trips to and from my car until everything was ready for the next step. First order of business, wrangling the solar fountain instructions, which, to be honest, nearly defeated me. But I wasn't about to lose to some black and white manual, and eventually it started to make sense. Betty helped. Kind of. After a swift outfit change, it was time to begin digging a hole for the pond to sit in. Now, this isn't a necessity, but if the pond is slightly buried, there's less chance of it overheating on very hot days. Plus, it would help that seamless blend into the natural habitat that I was after. So I dug and dug until my fingertips were black and then stood back to appreciate my hard work. Then I filled in around the hole before noticing a little friend on my grandpa's fern plant. I guess that was my sign to plant that next, and I wanted it to be slightly behind the pond so the leaves would sort of drape over it, and so I dug another hole near to my apple tree, but leaving enough space for the fern's roots to spread, and just like that, we'd set the stage for the next part of this project. Okay, so what I've decided to do is, even though the plants that I purchased earlier come already potted in these lovely plastic plant pots, I'm going to repot them, I think, in these kidney-shaped pond baskets, which will be really nice because they'll kind of curve around the barrel, or at least that's the aim. I haven't actually tested that they fit in the barrel, but I'm sure everything will be fine. So I've got my pond baskets, I've got some aquatic compost, and I've just got some standard gravel, which I'm going to wash before I add it to the top of the plants to make sure we don't get too much residue in the water. Yeah, I mean, I have no real plan of what's going to go where. Let's see what we've got here. So we've got some marginal plants. This one, this lovely one, And this one, I got the guy to pick out for me because it has a little flower. And can you see that little flower? And apparently there'll be more flowers that'll bloom later on. So they're all marginal plants. And then we've got an oxygenator, which are apparently very important if you're not going to have a filter pump in your pond. Just get oxygenators and they'll do the job for you. So I thought this one was lovely. That's another oxygenator there. This big one is an oxygenator as well. Is that everything? Oh, and I got some floaty plants to sit on the top of the water. Apparently lily pads would be far too large and they'd end up shading the entire pond, which we don't want. There needs to be a nice kind of balance. So we didn't get lily pads, but we got some. This apparently is British. This is a British homegrown plant. And these lovely floaters are very much not, but we got those as well. So we're just gonna kind of go for it. Oh, and these are going to go inside the pond and they don't need to be repotted in any way. You literally sit them in just as they are. And they have a nice little wavy effect, which hopefully all the nice little critters will enjoy. So let's just get planting. Let's kind of go with the flow and see how we fare. Oh, I forgot scissors. I can't be bothered to go back inside. So we're just gonna go for it. Oh, a very different consistency to normal soil, which obviously is the whole intent. Aquatic compost is definitely the best because it doesn't spread about as much as normal soil does. It's a bit more dense, I think. So let's just get some of that in there. This is such a dirty project today. I'm just gonna go straight in with my hands. See if you can see this. It's very dense, very, very dense soil. It's kind of like clay. Just gonna get all of that in there. Whoo, it smells funny. So why don't we go for a marginal, and an oxygenator in the middle. I think that would be nice. Yeah, let's do that. Let's get rid of this gravel for a second. I did ask the guy if any of these don't get along, and apparently they're all fine. Apparently they all get along just fine. Not like when I plant my vegetables in the garden beds. There are some vegetables that don't get along very well at all, but apparently these aren't quite as picky of their company. Okay, oh my goodness. We definitely need some more gravel. Okay, let me go wash the gravel and then we'll do the next lot. The gravel definitely needed a proper rinse. Thanks again, YouTube. Seriously, have a look at how murky that water was. Okay, so we've washed our gravel, so we're just gonna put that around these lovely plants. And this will help keep all the soil in place when we lower them into the water or fill up the water around them. There we go. Oh my gosh, that is now very heavy. Let's do our next one. Where am I going to put my gravel? Right on here. What have we got next? So we've got you two little babies, an oxygenator and a marginal. So now we're going to have marginal, oxygenator, oxygenator. Let's go in with that compost. I think I'll probably use all of this now. Probably could have done with a bit more of the compost, but it's okay. We're going to make it work. There we go. Make a nice little bed for you. This is definitely a dirty hands kind of day. There we go. I think I literally bought just enough gravel and just enough compost to make this work. Yay! So we have number 1 and we've got number 2. Yay! Time to put my vision together, which was a lot of trial and error. The barrel isn't huge and so I needed to be clever with the arrangement. But after much adjusting here and there, I was finally happy and we could begin filling her up. Then, finally, came the fun part. Tap water isn't ideal, but it also isn't the worst thing in the world because the chlorine will eventually evaporate and the plants can use the nitrogen that's in tap water. Here's looking at you again, YouTube. I believe that nature can offer us a certain sense of peace that we all need in this day and age. For example, me seeing this crow today, pottering about in the rain. And do you know why he was in my garden? Because I make sure to leave any discarded pigeon eggs that I replace with fake eggs out for the crows. And I always leave the eggs for them in the same place on top of my sundial. And crows aren't daft, they know where it's at. It provides a great source of nutrients, and if I take care of my local crows, then they'll return the favour by protecting my pigeon flock from birds of prey. Because crows are notoriously territorial. But yes, thank you, my spooky friend. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, the debut of the £99 water fountain. It hadn't been plugged in for long, so I was worried that it hadn't caught much sun, but lo and behold, it worked. And then very soon after, I wasn't quite happy with its height, and so I did a quick rejig, and voila! Not too shabby if you ask me. I then left the pond for a bit to allow the water to settle, and then I found out that the fountain had different settings, and so, after trying them all, I settled on this one, which I think looks the most natural, and it didn't shoot the water all across the lawn. As dusk fell, I sat by my new creation and listened to the sweet symphony of nature. This is exactly what I'd been after. You see, I struggle with anxiety, which I know is a sentence people hear so often nowadays, but I've had it since childhood. In fact, I used to get this really strange notion that everything was going incredibly slowly, almost like in slow motion, but also going rapidly fast at the same time. It was a very worry feeling in my brain and kind of an onset of panic, and I've had that, like I say, since I was very young. Anxiety is still something I very much struggle with to this day. Only recently I had a panic attack whilst driving. But it's moments like this that truly centre my soul. And it's why I work so hard to create them. Little pockets of joy, little pockets of calm. Later that evening, my mum and I decided to sit by our new feature with a cheeky glass of Baileys. At night time, this area of the garden really comes to life, and it's already so magical with all of our fairy lights. But the fountain also had a small LED light which I did not expect and I thought looked really lovely. So we broke out the chocolate and sat underneath the stars, chatting away and listening to the peaceful pitter-patter of our little pond. A weekend project, yes, but also something so much more. A new beginning, rooted in old memories.